what's going to happen in Ukraine now? Because now we passed the May
Yeah,
20th. There is
yeah.
a legitimate problem with
Mm.
Zelensky being the president. And so, what is happening next, in your view?
Well, no one knows exactly, but what one can say is that Zelensky himself is becoming increasingly insecure,
Uh-huh.
and you can see this. Apparently, there was a report in The Economist. The Economist, by the way, covered the fact that he's no longer the elected president of Ukraine, and that was a surprise. You wouldn't
Mhm.
have expected The Economist to say that, but he's apparently very tense, very nervous. Um, he now apparently screams at his generals. This is something that The Economist said, which suggests to me that he's very frightened because it's
Mhm.
frightened people who behave in that kind of way. Lavrov, now, of course, he wasn't there, but he says that he was told by a top diplomat who was. He says that there was a meeting in Kiev in April when Zelensky had a massive tantrum as well, in full view of the whole diplomatic corps there. And anyway, it's a difficult situation. Of course, the situation on the battlefronts is getting worse as well, and
Mhm.
rapidly so, by the way, more rapidly, I think, than people in the West fully understand. And on top of all of that, we've now had this mobilization law, which is apparently causing the men to vanish from the streets and the cities. And there's been film appearing of the cities across Ukraine deserted because the men have all hidden themselves.
Mhm.
And this is now starting to be confirmed by Ukrainian officials. So it's a very bad situation in Ukraine and an unsustainable one.
And even Dominic Cumming is saying that the West is getting effed, by supporting Ukraine. So do you think it can really go to November, or it's probably deteriorating faster than they anticipated?
I think it is deteriorating much faster than they anticipated, and I think much faster than they understand. Now, the Ukrainians are getting very desperate. They've sent a delegation to Washington. They're trying to get the Americans to agree to green light missile strikes using American weapons deep inside Russia. This is clearly an attempt by the Ukrainians to involve the US in their problems. They're also asking the Americans to send trainers to Ukraine as well. Now, these trainers, like the trainers the US once sent to Vietnam, are not going to be just trainers. They're going to be involved in actual combat, inevitably. So, what the Ukrainians, who can see that the writing is on the wall, as we say, that they're worrying, that they're trying to rescue themselves by pulling in the West. They have one last hope, which is that the West will come to their rescue.
Hmm.
And they're also gambling that this conference in Switzerland that is looming over the horizon, this peace conference, will somehow endorse Zelensky's plan and will lead to some kind of international ultimatum um, towards Russia, not just a Western ultimatum, but a general ultimatum. But apparently, and this is what went wrong apparently at that meeting in April, diplomats are telling Zelensky that that isn't going to happen, and he wasn't happy. So it's a very dangerous situation. I don't think Western governments fully understand how bad the situation is. I think they still believe that Ukraine is going to be able to hold on. Um, but the reality, the actual reality, is that it is deteriorating all the time. Morale is deteriorating across Ukraine. The military situation is deteriorating. The army in Ukraine is close to collapse. And of course, Zelensky himself, as you rightly said, he's no longer the constitutionally elected president of Ukraine. And that obviously opens him up to all kinds of challenges if the situation continues to get worse.
And how about Israel? I also think that Israel is also another almost like a, a situation that is impossible for the Israeli government now, right? It's the latest is Spain, Ireland, and Norway is recognizing Palestine, and of course the indictment, arrest warrant from the ICC, and all the walls are closing in. They're not making much of a progress in terms of their fight in the battle, if we can call it a battlefield. And so, what is going on there? What's the next there?
You've described it perfectly. I mean, the same applies to Ukraine. All the walls are closing in.
Mhm.
The operation in Gaza has failed. I think I read in the American media just the other day that um, the majority of Hamas fighters have not been killed. The majority of Hamas's tunnel network still survives. Hamas has recruited thousands more fighters. It's still there. It still functions. Israel's economy is in crisis. Northern Israel is deserted because of the missile launches by Hezbollah. And there isn't an obvious solution to this problem. So, again, and of course, we've had the repeated votes now in the United Nations, including the recent vote on giving Palestine membership in the General Assembly. And we've had now this recognition from more and more European states. So the Israelis are, I think, getting desperate. And we discussed this earlier in the program that they're becoming desperate, and it's more likely as they get desperate that they're going to take ever more reckless and dangerous steps in order to try to reverse the situation. Now, if they were involved in some way in President Raisi of Iran's death, well,
Right.
that would obviously be one. But one can imagine that they might do some even more extreme things at some point over the next few months. Very difficult situation indeed. And unfortunately, again, the United States, far from exercising some force of, being some kind of force of restraint, some kind of force of good advice and wise counsel, um, makes feeble protestations when the Israelis do something terribly bad. Oh, this isn't what we want. We've advised the Israelis not to do this.
Hmm.
We've asked them not to attack Rafah, or whatever it is. They do that, but of course, at the same time, they're deeply implicated because, of course, they continue to provide Israel with weapons and diplomatic cover. And now, of course, they're going to sanction the International Criminal Court, which completely predictable. And note that that's what has made them really angry, not the horrors in Gaza. That hasn't made them angry at all. But the International Criminal Court issuing an arrest warrant against the Prime Minister of Israel, that is outrageous, apparently, and they're all furious about it.
And I find interesting that there's 12 senators. They sent a letter to threaten the ICC before they
Yeah,
issued the arrest
yeah,
warrant, right? And in
yes,
that letter, they actually said that the Russian, they said Israel is not a ICC member,
yeah.
and for that reason, there is no legitimacy, jurisdiction. But Russia and Ukraine are not ICC member either. So even the U.S. senator's letter kind of like is saying that that is wrong, what they did for Putin, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, this is the irony of it because, of course, they actually lobbied the ICC. I remember when they did it, they lobbied the ICC to issue a warrant against Putin and said, don't worry about the jurisdiction issue. This really doesn't apply. Just go ahead and do it anyway. So,
Yeah.
of course, the ICC did it. And now the ICC, which has been facing a huge amount of criticism from many countries around the world because it's sat back and allowed the situation in Gaza to develop in the way that it has. Anyway, they've done what they did with Russia. They've issued this arrest warrant against Netanyahu and Gallant. Um, and of course, the Americans say, oh, no, you can't do this. It's outside your jurisdiction.
Fiction.
Completely forgetting what they said about Russia. The Russians, by the way, are laughing over this. The Russian spokesman, Zaharova, came out and said that the scorpion has stung itself with its own tail. The spider is trapped in its own web.
Yeah. That's a very good way to describe it. And in fact, actually, somebody pointed out that Palestine is an ICC member. So if you say more
Yeah,
legitimate, in this case,
much
you know, they
more.
actually, yeah, have more than the Russian case. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And
Absolutely. Well, of course, they now pretend, of course, that it's not a state.
yeah,
And then now that you can imagine the anger now that Spain, Ireland, and Norway have just recognized it. I mean,
then
I
yeah.
think 139 countries basically now recognize that Palestine is a state.
Yeah.
Again, it's denial of reality.
Okay. Before we go, just how do you feel feel the Israeli ambassador to the UN, Erdan? I think he's comical figure now, it
Yeah.
seems to me. The latest is of course, he's really angry when the United Nations had a silent of 1 minute of silence to remember Naisi. He said, "Who's next? Are you going to do that? You know, mourn the death of Hitler or something like that." But before that, he did something I thought really incredible that he shredded the UN's charter using a shredder, right? And he's shredding that. But isn't it the whole legitimacy of the Israel as a state, I thought, was because of UN Resolution 273, isn't it?
Absolutely.
What is he doing?
Absolutely. Yeah, he's reinventing the art of diplomacy. I think he's conducting diplomacy in a way that it has never been conducted before. I mean, it's quite astonishing to see, actually. I mean, it's I don't know how to explain it. You know, a combination of arrogance, megalomania, self-importance. I don't know how to describe it, but I mean, it was one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen happen. Actually, that he would shred the UN Charter in front of the UN General Assembly,
Mhm.
and would think that he was going to win any friends that way. I mean, it was. I mean, it just left me speechless. Actually, I mean, you're quite right. It was at a certain level very funny. It was, but as I said, as diplomacy goes, it was so bizarre and unorthodox. It just makes you wonder, you know, the kind of people who are leading Israel today.
Yeah. I just wanted to let you know that shredder, I thought it was very handy. It's a small, shredder. So I
Mm.
even look it up, I was pretty sure I can find it in, somewhere. Sure enough, there was a news saying that shredder, the sale has gone up quite a bit. So, so, so he became the spokesperson for that shredder.
Well, there you go. Well, there you
Yeah,
go.
because it's not just me notice it because it's very handy, right? You can put it on your desk. Normally the shredder is
Mm.
kind of big and clumsy somewhere. I thought, oh,
Yeah,
that shredder looks good.
I know. I know. But seriously, I mean, Western leaders and Western diplomats are behaving in very bizarre ways. Like, I mean, with Ukraine collapsing, we discussed this in our last program, I think. Blinken goes off to Kiev, goes to apparently a Nazi-themed cafe. Apparently, he didn't know that, but they took away all the
Yeah,
Nazi symbols and paraphernalia before he arrived, and starts playing guitar, even as, you know, the country's collapsing around him. And, you know, we have the Israeli ambassador behaving in this eccentric way. It does make you wonder
yeah,
what kind of leaders the West has now. And again, I have to say this. I mean, people see Putin and Xi Jinping together. They see serious people.
yeah,
They see
yeah,
the two delegations meeting. They see governments that always behave in a completely dignified way. And I mean, I think most of the world says to themselves, well, you know, we can see who the serious people are and who are
yeah,
not. We're going to work with those who are serious and who have the real solutions to our problems.
yeah. People can see who is the spokesperson for the shredder. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. There is so much going on. I'm sure next week will be another extraordinary week.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely so. Just one last question. Telling me about the landscape behind you. Is it
It,
anywhere? It looks.
I think, I'm not sure. I think it's probably Taihu, the Tai Lake. Wuxi is where my father come from, which is a city in
Oh,
Jiangsu province. So it could be there.
oh,
I think it's one of the pictures that I took when I was visiting there. So
it's
it's
beautiful.
yeah, it's
It's
a
very
beautiful
beautiful. Again,
place.
it looks like a Chinese landscape.
Yeah.
Anyway, there we go.
China has a lot of these places. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you
Have a
so
great
much.
day. Have a
You
great
too.
day. Thank you, Sophia. Next week we'll speak again. Right.
Great. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.